Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in for another episode of Leadership for the Now. My name is Florin Lungo, and I'm so delighted to be with you today. And today, I'm joined by my teaching partner, Alena Ipanova. Welcome, Alena.
Hello, Florin. Thank you so much for warm welcoming. Always nice to be here with you. And today, the topic we are going to cover is feedback, which popped up in our previous conversations quite often. So it feels especially good to be able to cover it today.
Absolutely, yeah. So why don't we start with discussing what feedback is, right, and why it's important? Can you share your view on that?
Yes, so just to give the context to that, if we talk about feedback in the corporate setting,
Yes.
the feedback in relation to leadership, team development. So the feedback, as I see it, is very important for our development, both personal and professional. And it might be related not only to performance, but also to how we are as human beings in terms of social relationships, our contribution to the common environment, social environment at work, and also our intentions, attitudes to create this feedback culture. Many people talk about that, but what is it exactly? And very often, it people mean that it's something about performance review or developmental conversations. This is when we are supposed to give feedback. And in my opinion, it should be a part of culture. It should be a normalized thing that it's okay to share feedback, to seek for feedback. So this is my take on it. What would you add to that, Florin?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And to kind of emphasize the importance of feedback, and you made a really good point that we should separate, like, the common definition of feedback is during those performance reviews or yearly appraisals, right? That's when leaders believe, okay, now it's the moment that I can give feedback to my, or I should be giving
They
feedback.
have to, they have to, they have to.
Exactly. But let me share a story. So one of my colleagues at Maestro Leadership, when he started his first job at IBM many years ago, he tried to do a really good job, and he thought that he was kind of performing above kind of the requirement of that position. And when he got the first kind of performance review, he was surprised because his manager, on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the top and 5 being the worst, then he got a 4. And he was surprised, like, why did I get a 4? Because my perception of my performance was different. And the manager shared that, well, I never give more than 4 to someone in the first 6 months.
Hmm.
And that was like, it just came as a surprise because they never had a discussion. They never had a feedback conversation before. He didn't get any feedback on his performance. And that's why there was a misalignment. And we call this misaligned expectations. Like me, as the leader, I have expectations of you. But if I don't communicate those expectations, if I don't make sure that I help you correct the course, constantly, then you're going to be surprised at the end of the year or in every quarter when you hear what I think about your performance. So I think it's impossible almost to how do I know that I do my job well?
Hmm.
I was in such a position where I didn't get feedback on the, oh, you're doing okay, right? But what's that? What does it mean? Like, tell me a little bit more. What parts I'm doing okay? Because I'm sure there are some parts that I'm not doing okay. So I think I completely agree with you. To create a feedback culture, this has to be part of our behavior. Because if you think about culture, culture is actually it's common behavior, right? It's the habits, how we do things, right? And in order for us to create a feedback culture, we need to integrate feedback into our culture.
It should be normalized. It should be normalized. And with the story that you share, I also think about the continuous feedback, the importance of sharing feedback continuously. It's not only when it's a certain milestone or we came to the point that now we all have developmental talks or performance reviews. This is when we people are dreading actually when they do have it in their calendars. I talk to so many leaders and they, okay, how do I do that? So I just have to survive over these 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And this attitude should be changed to, or this mindset should be exchanged on something different, that you actually have a chance to have a deeper conversation based on those continuous conversations that you had during or over a certain period of time.
Yeah,
So if we talk
absolutely.
about feedback as a culture, I wonder, Florin, what do you notice while working with leaders, while coaching leaders? I'm sure that feedback pops up as one of the points there. What are the most common challenges that leaders actually experience in terms of that? Would you
Yeah,
share?
absolutely. Yeah. The first challenge that leader have with offering feedback is related to the speed of business, like how fast do we do things, and giving feedback and helping a person to improve on one area or any area requires time. In other words, some leaders, they just try to do things themselves, so they're not happy with the input that they get from an individual on their team, and instead of taking the time to giving feedback to that individual, to helping that person correct or improve whatever the output was, they say, well, I'm just going to fix it myself because the deadline is tonight and I don't have the time. And then after they deliver whatever was to deliver, they move on with their business and with their agenda, and they don't come back to discuss that thing and say, hey, I had to do
Mhm.
these changes because this is what the client required or what was expected, and here is how I think. Right? Every time I coach someone, I we discuss about. They say, well, my team knows this. And when I say, how do you know that your team knows this? Because it's very easy to assume that if I'm thinking this way and if I'm producing work this way, this is the way my team is going to produce work. And whenever they produce something different, we assume that they should know that this is the way this client requires it, or this is the way this project requires it. So if we don't spend the time to give that kind of feedback, then we're not going to develop a feedback culture. We're just going to fix the problem. We're going to be a firefighter. And over the long run, it might seem that now I fixed the problem, it's done, it's delivered, but over the long run, it's not helping, and the people are not developing.
Mhm.
So I think that will be
Mhm.
kind of the first thing, right? To take the time, because stopping, offering feedback, discussing, because maybe if you offer feedback the right way, there will be some two-way discussion, right? It's not like, okay, I'm
It
giving you,
should be. It should be
should be,
two-way discussion.
which means that it will take a little bit more time than just you telling the person what should be improved on this PowerPoint or whatever the output was, right? So because they will want to know, okay, so why is this important, or help me understand where are you coming from when you're telling me that this should be done in a different way. So this
Mhm.
is it's much deeper conversation. It might take longer, and leaders feel that I don't have the time to do that right now. I'm going to take it later, and later it doesn't have the same impact because that's in the past. Like, why didn't you tell me then and you're telling me now? I don't even remember what I put in that presentation that you're telling me right now that it's not
Mhm.
what you expected. So I think this is a common challenge. And then there is the handling the difficult conversations, because telling someone that something needs to be improved in their work or in their behavior, it's tough, it's difficult. It's a That's why people are dreading those developmental talks, because they feel like, how is this going to be perceived? I need to tell them to be better, but how do I put this? That's another challenge. Like, how do I communicate that? How do I communicate
Mhm.
this to my team? I think this is kind of the first kind of three challenges that leaders face.
Thank you so much for sharing. And as you were speaking, I thought about feedback being a dialogue. So it's a conversation. There are two parts, two parties taking part in that, and it should be a dialogue. Otherwise, it's the result of the whole feedback session will not matter at all. If I'm giving you feedback just for the sake of sharing feedback because I have to do that, it's in the planning, but then I'm not checking in with you. Is it actually a good time? Are you ready to receive the feedback? Are we both ready to have a discussion around that? So that would be the first point. And I think here, what is missing in many leaders that I notice is this ability to build rapport with people, to really make it a normal thing, to normalize it, that it's okay if you're a team member and I'm on a managerial position. It's okay for you to come to me and share feedback, and I will be curious and interested to seek feedback from you as well. Not only these things, and then culture comes to my mind as well, because imagine you integrate from a different culture where you used to get feedback in a different way, when it was just one-way street, when you just listen everything your manager has to say, and then you have to swallow it and act upon it. You're expected to do that, and you're not allowed to question because it's a sign of disrespect. You transition to a different culture, and then you apply the same behavior. So here it is important to have conversations. I think we also talked about it, about the team culture and how you create relationships, and having conversations with the team about what's the way you prefer to receive feedback and to give feedback. Should it be straightforward, or should I check in with you on this or on that? So having those conversations can be very helpful.
Yeah,
I think.
absolutely. I think you touched a little bit on to what stops leaders from seeking and receiving feedback, right? And I want to get back to that. But before I do, I think you made an observation there about where you mentioned feedback conversation, right, or something like that. And I think that's also maybe something that is challenging for leaders, because they think it has to be formal, like now we're having a feedback conversation, or now we're having a whatever you want to call it. I don't know how organizations are calling it, but for me it's more like the one-on-one discussion, right? But for me it's more like it should be whenever you feel there's something that you need to tell someone on your team. I'll just say, hey, Alena, can we have a coffee? Can we have a talk? Let's have lunch. One of the leaders that I interview on this podcast, when we were inviting leaders and interviewing them, share something that for me was interesting, because I think it could be applied a lot on the team leadership and feedback. But she shared that leaders should take candidates to lunch. So in other words, you're recruiting for a position and you have 3 candidates that are qualified for you to make a decision on, and then you take them out for lunch. So in other words, you get out of the formal interview setup and then have an informal conversation with those people. And I'm wondering, why should not leaders take their team out for lunch? But not all of them at once, because okay, that's a team building activity. But just like informally, like no reason, just have lunch with your teammates. You will find things about them, and you will be able to, in that informal setup, to discuss things that have to do with work, and give feedback in a much better way, because there is no tension. It's not this formal discussion. And I think that's also a mindset shift that has to happen for us to build a feedback culture, and a healthy one is to not see feedback as something very formal that we do at regular times, that we have one-on-ones every other week, and we don't discuss in between those. Okay, I have something to tell Alena, but I'm going to wait until our one-on-one discussion next week, right? I think that's a really important mindset shift. What do you think?
Florin, how do you imagine that in a virtual setting? Because we know that the future of work is changing now, and sometimes we just don't have a possibility to take our people for lunch and have a conversation, as we might be working remotely. And there are companies or teams working fully remotely. So it's a different setup. Maybe it's it's the topic for another show. But just also thinking about how to adjust feedback. Do you have something to
Yes,
share in
I
relation to
have.
that?
Yeah. So I'm sharing. I'll share you. Here is how you do it. You you of course know where your team lives, right? So even if they are remotely, you do this. You buy a voucher to one of the local coffee shop or restaurants that they can bring lunch. So you say, hey, Alena, I know we're in a virtual setup and we cannot meet for lunch. I would love to have lunch with you and then discuss and then just get to know you better. So here is a voucher. I enclose a voucher to your local, uh, whatever, Starbucks or whatever. Bring some lunch. Go pick up some lunch, and bring it in front of your computer. I'm gonna bring my lunch box, and we're just gonna have a virtual lunch. I think that's how I would do it if I would be in the virtual setup.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm curious to have actually more conversations with people on this topic, because again, depending on the industry, we can work in a very fast-paced environment, and often people just opt out because they say, okay, I chose to work remotely because I want to focus on other things, and I
Yeah,
do my work here. So how do you create the space for that and integrate feedback culture so that people don't feel that I'm pressured to go
yeah,
out if I don't want to?
yeah.
Um, just checking in and checking for the best practices. So this is something that I'm willing to explore a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a wild idea. It's thinking differently. But I think, I have to be honest. I use this with clients in the
Mm-hmm.
COVID era. Like we could not meet in person. I want to meet with them, and I knew we cannot meet, and I just use this exact strategy. So, and I tell you, it works, right? So
Mm-hmm.
then I think it's just. We need to go around those barriers that we have created for us. And if
Mm-hmm.
time is an issue, then maybe you don't do it in lunchtime. You do it, in regular work hours, and they're paid for that time, right? So I think
Mm-hmm.
if we really want to do it, we're gonna find ways to do it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Florin, one other thing that I've been thinking a lot when people talk about feedback, they usually think about negative aspect of that, and or we can call it constructive, but still people refer more to negative. But there's
Yeah,
also positive feedback, and it is so important for leaders to express that as well, for team members to express that as well, to make it a part of culture. And here we can be role models, each of us. It doesn't matter on which position, role we are in a company. So when we project this behavior, it's contagious because people feel appreciated, people feel valued, people feel that you care about them. When you actually notice some things about them and you share positive feedback continuously, it builds
absolutely.
up relationships, and then maybe it's not going to be that dreading to have that performance review or developmental talk and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you make such a good point because um, we need to reward the behavior that we want to see in our team, in our people. So if we don't tell them you did a great job when they do a great job, they don't know what do we expect from them. So and
Mm,
also when you reward the behavior, so let's say I reward someone on my team for doing something great in one area, then this gives the direction and also the framework to the other team members. Say, hey, if I want to be rewarded, if I want to be appreciated, I need to do what this person have done, right? So it has two aspects. First, reinforces the positive behavior that we want in our team, and secondly, sets the stage for our team members to know, okay, so if I want to be promoted, if I want to be appreciated, I need to do what this person do because I see that's what the company rewards. and
mm,
and this also applies, to teamwork and individual performance. If you reward team performance, then you're going to have more teamwork. If you reward individual performance, then you're going to have more individual talents that try to work by themselves and perform individually. So again, what you reward gets done, and also it's reinforced as a positive behavior.
I agree with that. I would add one point to distinguish a little bit, because I really want leaders to think about intrinsic motivation, not not the like mostly outside factor. And I can really see that, I can feel that, because I have 3 kids and they are such great manipulators in terms of they feel differently and they are so straightforward. So they know exactly which behavior is rewarded, and it's not it might not be driven by their internal motivation. So they just know what to do in order to get what they want. When it comes to work and relationships, I feel it's extremely important to be driven from inside out, together with other possible rewards. So in terms of feedback culture, it should also go from within. I'm telling you that not because I want you to do certain things or whatsoever, because I deeply care about you, because it means a lot to me to see your development, because by seeing you growing, I actually can pat myself on the shoulder because I contributed to that. This is my contribution. It is probably a part of my legacy. So there is a deeper meaning to that, more meaningful. The source is more meaningful rather than just looking from it from the outside. So I would add this inside out perspective as well to make it stronger.
Yeah, you're so right. Yeah, absolutely.
Florin, one thing that I wonder about in your experience, because there are lots of conversations about different feedback models.
Yeah.
And definitely there are differences within cultures and systems. Every organization tries to use the model that they believe is good for feedback giving, which I think is a good point to give people a common language to create a common frame. But then how we do things within this frame might be different. So I wonder, what can you share from your experience in terms of feedback models and how you actually put your feedback to practice? How do you practice that?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of experience with using models, and I don't know an organization that has a feedback model that it's imposed to everyone. They are guidelines that this is the way we offer feedback here, and usually it's coming out from the training they get. Like when an organization wants to train their people to build this feedback culture, the trainer, they hire someone like us, right? And then we come in and we share a model, right? And then if they like it, they will embrace it and they will use it. I think I'll like, because coaching on a model, because if you think about feedback, it's almost like trying to coach your someone on your team to get to a conclusion or an answer that you want them to get without telling them directly. That's almost like, in my view, coaching and feedback, like offering feedback, you have to have more of a coaching type conversation. You should not be very direct in telling exactly what needs to be improved, because whenever you tell someone something like that, the first reaction is defense. Like whenever I am given feedback, my first reaction is, well, I've done that because of this. So I'm starting an internal conversation about arguing with the fear. I might not say it, but I'm trying to defend. I'm trying to see, why did I do this? And so when I coach leader, I try to help them, not rely on a feedback model entirely, because what they do, it becomes robotical, it becomes methodical, and then people kind of know what's coming next, and that's not you don't get that connection that you mentioned. You don't get that feeling from how is the person feeling, how is the person behaving. Like you don't get that when you have steps and you just follow the steps. And so to summarize, I advise leaders, and when I work with organizations, we're looking to create a coaching conversation more than a feedback conversation. So what does it mean by that? It's starting with discussing about the person's goals and aspirations, and also feedback. Many times it's very short term and based on something that happened in the last few weeks. But feedback it's also should also be strategic and be actually talking about the future. So if I want to, for example, be promoted, I want feedback from my leader to know what do I need to do to get there. If my aspirations are this, how do I get there? So we try to not stay too much focus on a framework. We want to be able to read the room, to read the energy, to see where the person is coming from, and try to be more coachable in that conversation rather than using a frame. But maybe you have a frame that you could share, or you're familiar with something that organization use. So what is your view on that?
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. I'm a fan of coaching, and I experience the power of it in my daily life. And I do have several models that I see companies using, and one of the most used currently is SBI, and it stands for Situation, Behavior, and Impact. And of course, it's I have some leaders who have those internal jokes like, "Do not SBI me now," sort of things, and it might add a little bit of humor. What is important here, and I think I see people taking a good grasp on it, is that any feedback conversation shouldn't be targeting personality. We should talk about behavior, because behavior is something that we can flex, something that we can change, and position it into the space that it's not, we can project different behaviors, we can behave differently in different situations. It doesn't make us a bad person. We can change, we can shift, and the focus is not how bad was that you've done it, but more about, okay, how do we do it so that it serves well? And shifting focus totally from that, stepping out of ego in a feedback conversation. I really love that you're sharing, like, as a leader, you should know the goals, what drives your people. But then also, I think that responsibility should be on both sides. If you're giving me feedback and I feel that, okay, I just have to like survive through this conversation, I'm not open for any coaching or whatsoever. It's good to develop the skills and ability to be able to say that, now is actually not a good time for me. I can't really receive the feedback, even if you do it in the best possible way. So being mindful of that from both sides, that it's not a good time. Let's see, when is a good time for you? What do you think? To have this conversation, then there will be impact, then there will be result. Otherwise it's going to be just a check mark. So this is my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for sharing that that framework. I think it's also like when I'm, because feedback, if you think about feedback, many leaders think, okay, I need to tell the person what they need to improve. But when you use a coaching approach, you will start with some questions. So what did you try to achieve by doing that, rather than why did you do it? Because if you ask why did you do it, right, then they'll defend themselves because this is why. But when we ask someone, what did you try to achieve? Well, I tried to deliver that, or I tried to do this. Then you start to looking at the situation and the behavior, as you said, not the person. But you try to separate the being from the behavior, right? The person from the doing for what happened. And I think that's probably the, if leaders can get better at coaching their teams, they'll be getting better at offering feedback. I think that's, if I can summarize this in a way, right? And if I give a tip to leaders, if you want to get better at offering feedback, get better at asking questions, because you can only offer feedback after you ask enough questions to really understand the situation.
Exactly, to be able to look at the situation from a perspective of another person, right? So in terms of questions, it totally resonates with me, the ability to ask powerful questions instead of open questions. Even if you have assumptions, I always say it's okay to have assumptions, it's human, but do we act upon our assumptions or not? So this is the choice that we can make. So checking in with the person and saying, what do you think yourself about your performance? How do you feel? How do you feel about your goals? And if you were to give feedback to yourself, what would you say? What would you praise yourself for? What would you advise yourself to improve? I think just having a conversation from that perspective can open up, can create safer space for a more productive talk.
Absolutely, yeah. And think about just asking all of those questions that you just mentioned in a feedback session, right? How many leaders do that?
Hmm. Actually, I have some statistics, and
You have.
it's relevant here. So some statistics by Gallup. So they found that 1 in 5 employees strongly agree that they receive meaningful feedback. Only 1 in 5. And then we have 1 in 3 who strongly agrees that managers truly care about them. So it can tell us how many
Yeah,
leaders
exactly.
actually placing the conversation in that space. And there is a huge room for all of us to develop and to grow in terms of asking questions, listening, tuning in, checking in with people, building rapport and relationships. There's a huge room to improve.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we just scratched the surface in this conversation, and we could go on for hours. And
Mm.
in order to help leaders really build this feedback culture, I mean, we cannot just do that in a half an hour, episode here. But we hope that
Yeah,
we give leaders some ideas and some
yeah,
thoughts to think about, and some perspective that they might consider. And if they want to, dive deeper in this, we're available. Like, just contact us on LinkedIn. We'll be more than happy to sit with you and discuss your specific situation with your team and your organization.
definitely, definitely. Thank you so much for today's conversation,
Yes.
Florin, and for sharing all your stories.
Yeah, thank you, Alena, and I look forward to see you on the next episode. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Me
Take care.
too.
Bye bye. See you
Bye
soon.
bye.
Bye.